Hello everyone, Hyper here, and in today's video, we'll be taking a look at the second major round of changes for the Unholy DK. Also in this video, I will be mentioning a few changes that were added to Blood DK, but they're not major enough to warrant a video of their own. The first major change is just a damage buff across the board, and this is just to balance the spec out a little bit. We got damage buff to most of our major abilities, such as Festering Strike, Scourge Strike, Festering Wound, Apocalypse, and Soul Reaper. Then they also changed the talents a little bit. As you might be able to notice here in the level 60 row, we actually lost Debilitating Infestation, which applied a 3-second slow to every target that is affected by Outbreak. Now DI was actually a decent talent after every other class's slow was nerfed, and they kind of changed a little bit the way DI works. It was semi-reliable and it was useful for kiting, but it was still only a 50% slow for 3 seconds, and it cost basically 1 rune. And this was replaced with Grip of the Dead, and this does the same exact thing as it does for Blood, where your death and decay slows for 90%, and the snare is reduced by 10% every single second that death and decay is active. The second talent change happened in the level 90 row, where they removed Corpse Explosion, which was the talent which exploded your ghouls from Army of the Dead and Apocalypse whenever they expired, and they replaced it with Pestilence. This talent gives your Death and Decay a 10% chance to apply a Festering Wound every time it ticks, and at my current haste rating, this ticks 11 times on a target. So if you have 3 targets up, it's going to tick 33 times, so you should get about 3 wounds. So it's pretty decent. I don't see this being used in single target situations, but for AoE with certain builds, I can definitely see this talent being used. Also in this row, this is not really a major change, but they actually fixed our Epidemic. So now it will proc our Runic Corruption, because after they introduced the talent, there was still a bug where even though you spent Runic Power, your Runic Corruption was not getting triggered. So they fixed that, which is a very nice increase in rune generation on AoE situations. Then in the last row, they removed Dark Infusion and replaced it with Army of the Damned, which gives you CDR on Army of the Dead and Apocalypse every time you Death Coil. So for Apocalypse, it's a 1 second, and for Army, it's a 5-second CDR. With constant uptime and no Bloodlust or any sort of haste increasing abilities, I was able to get my Army of the Dead to about a 4-minute cooldown. And of course, this will also depend if you take the Harbinger of Doom talent, which was just renamed this patch. So it still does the same. You have 15% increased chance to proc Sudden Doom. So if you're taking that talent, you will get more CDR on your army and your Apocalypse. And then obviously if you take Soul Reaper, you get slightly less, but you get that Soul Reaper damage. So interesting dynamic between those talents. And then another big change that they added to this particular row is Summon a Gargoyle. Now this is purely a cosmetic change. A lot of people really like the way Dark Arbiter looks and the model they use for it. You will have the option between it looking like a regular Gargoyle that you're used to, or the Dark Arbiter from Legion. So that's just a nice little cosmetic change that I really appreciate they did. A few things that are still being worked on from the Blue Post. They said that they are working on ways to improve All Will Serve because they know it's a bland talent, and this might either come through them replacing the talent entirely or spicing it up a little bit through different changes. They have seen changes that were suggested and they're taking it into consideration, but we'll see what they come up with. Now for Blood, there's not that many changes, but they did a little bit of tuning just to bring Blood DK self-healing back in line. And to make the level 57 row a little more equal and fair, they actually nerfed Hemostasis from being 10% bonus damage and healing per stack down to 8%. And it kind of made sense because I was using this talent and the self-healing it gave you was actually insane. And they actually changed the wording on this talent from Legion. So each enemy that gets hit by your Blood Boil applies 1 stack to you. So if you have at least 5 targets, you will always have 5 stacks of Hemostasis after each time you Blood Boil. So that just kind of nerfs our self-healing a little bit. if you opt to take this talent. But overall, it's not a huge change. I think they just wanted to bring it a little bit back in line to where you were not pulling way ahead of other tanks when it comes to self-healing. The second change is to Mark of Blood. They added a 6-second cooldown to it. Previously, there was no cooldown on it, and they changed the duration from 25 seconds to 15 seconds. Now, I don't particularly see why they nerfed this even further, but for single target situations, obviously variations will not be that good, and it will just come down to numerically between Blood Worms and Mark of Blood. So another thing that's weird with Blood Worms is that it's supposed to also give you a little bit of a damage boost because those worms auto attack, but then whenever you consume them, you lose the damage bonus, but you heal. So I don't know, this is kind of a weird talent row when it comes to self-healing. For AoE, obviously, you will always go with Voracious, but then for single target, the choice will just come down to numerically what's best. And then one major thing that they changed, which is actually kind of a rollback rather than the forward change, is Ossuary now works the same way it does in Legion, where if you have at least 5 Bone Shield stacks, you get 5 runic power discount on your Death Strikes. And of course, with this change, they also nerfed down the maximum runic power increase from 20 to 10. So overall, I think the Ossuary is way better as it is right now. I didn't particularly like the one that extended the cap of our Bone Shield, and I mentioned that in the video I did about Blood DK. That sums up the Unholy and Blood DK changes for this build, and we're still waiting on Frost changes. So far, they've only changed a few tooltips and the wordings on it. Nothing really that changes the game mechanically. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit the like button and sub to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.